Tonight, I want to talk about upping your paint game in 2023. And you might be wondering, well, I'm quite happy with how my painting's going. I don't need to up my game. If you're happy with where your painting is, do not worry about it. This really comes from my own personal experiences and some of my own hobby goals for next year. So what I found through 2022, I've probably painted more models this year than I've painted in a long time. And I did go through a bit of a patch over the last few months where I haven't really painted very much, a bit of a kind of hobby slump. But when I have been painting this year, I've painted quite a few armies. And painting armies is a very different experience to just kind of painting sort of individual miniatures and trying to improve your standard. Generally, painting armies is around doing things quick, like speed painting or kind of finding shortcuts, finding ways to make a model or an army look cohesive and effective with a few spot colours without making it a chore to actually paint it, otherwise you just don't get it done. And so because of that, this year I've spent a lot of time developing kind of ways to get faster, ways to really push the contrast so that models look kind of like they stand out as an army. They really pop on the tabletop, but I'm not too worried about how individual models look. And I guess what that's done is it means I've neglected kind of trying to improve my painting. So I decided next year I want to try and improve my painting. I want to try and push the limits of what I can achieve before my old eyes and my shaky hands get much worse and I can't really improve. So I thought what I'd do is I would share 5 tips tonight that you can choose to use if you so wish and try and improve your painting in 2023. So the first one is paint a single miniature. Now, as you've just heard me say there, I've painted lots of armies, and army painting and batch painting are really not about getting better at kind of brush control. They're not really about kind of trying out new skills. You're very unlikely to be doing kind of sort of blending or kind of any kind of fancy detail work when you're painting armies. But if you're going to paint a single miniature and you're just going to paint it for fun, it doesn't need to be for an army. It doesn't need to be for a painting competition. It doesn't even need to be for a game you're playing. Just get that one miniature that you like the look of, that you're kind of inspired to paint, and just kind of go to town on it. Take your time with it and just really try and push yourself a little bit. Try some different techniques out. Try basing it a little bit differently than you would normally do. But just painting that one single miniature rather than painting a batch or painting like a crew for a skirmish game or something like that just gives you that opportunity to try some new stuff out and really try and kind of up your game a little bit. The second tip I would give you is try and paint outside of your comfort zone. Now, something I'm very much aware of that I do myself is I have certain, I should say, kind of colour triads that I use as almost like my crutch when I come to kind of, when I paint. There's a nice 3 colours of blue in a nice triad that I very often use, and I've used them like on my dwarfs for Kings of War. I've got a nice triad of reds that I use, and I've used them on many different armies over the years, and I enjoy painting red. There's certain colours that I just, they become my go-to when I decide to paint something. And because of that, I don't really push the skill level. I tend to just fall back on using that. So what I would suggest, and what I'm going to try and do myself, is to try and paint outside of my comfort zone. If I go back to the last tip about just buying that one model, it's a great way to get something that doesn't need to match other stuff. Like, for example, when I've been painting this year, some of my best paint jobs, I think, this year that I've painted have been my Marvel Crisis Protocol minis. And the reason that I think these have been among my best is because I've only had to paint them once. For example, when I painted the Hulk miniature, I really just kind of relaxed and just kind of almost went a little bit free flow with it. I wasn't trying to perfectly replicate the green skin tones from a comic book or from a movie or anything. He had to be green. It's the Hulk. Let's be fair. But that was as much like sort of direction as I had. I never paint green. I hardly ever use my green paints. And all I did, because I didn't have to replicate it anywhere else, was I just gradually sort of kept up lightening the green up, or I'd bring a different colour green in and mix 2 together and build up some of the highlights over the skin and try and push it a little bit and really try and work with it, trying to kind of highlight around the facial features. The Hulk's got like a big sort of like chunky grimace around his face, and there was some really nice kind of hard edges around the kind of sort of as his mouth was grimacing around the kind of the frame of his face. There's some really nice edges to really try and kind of work on sort of highlighting skin tones and stuff like that. And by trying to kind of push myself by painting outside of my comfort, using colours I wouldn't normally use, sort of painting a scale of miniature that I probably wouldn't normally use. All those things help me kind of push on a little bit and get a little bit better. And since then, I've kind of went back to painting armies and batch painting and speed painting. But I think the best stuff I've painted this year come when I was just painting like that and really kind of pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. So try that this year. Well, try that next year. The third piece of advice I would give you, or the third tip, is ask for advice. Now, I'm terrible at this. I kind of like, I don't know why, I don't know whether it's working on my own, kind of like it gets me into this kind of mindset that I do most things on my own these days, and I'm not good at asking for help, and I'm not good at asking for advice. But one thing I want to do this year, or next year I should say, is ask for advice when it comes to my painting. I want to try and take a painting class at some point over the next 12 months and actually sit down with somebody face to face and get them to kind of correct some of my basic mistakes. Because all of my painting I've learned just by trial and error. I could be doing a million things wrong, and I could be kind of making it harder to get better by doing the basics wrong. And I've always said at some point I wanted to try and have a painting lesson or a few painting lessons. So I think that's something I'm going to try and do over the next 12 months. But you don't have to go that far. You could just go to your local club and have a painting night and sit and paint with somebody else. Or if there's somebody online sort of that's in a Facebook group or is in a Patreon group or a Discord group that you really like their painting, see if you can hop on like a Zoom call or something with them, or see if they'll just sort of text you some advice. It needs to be somebody that you kind of trust. You just want constructive criticism and maybe a nudge in the right direction. You don't want somebody to go, well, that's absolutely garbage, I wouldn't do it, like that kind of thing. You want some advice, you want some encouragement. So make sure you ask the right person, but reach out and ask for some help. Reach out and ask for some advice. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want, but it's very, very difficult to replicate what somebody's doing in a video when it comes to maybe certain techniques. It'd be far easier for somebody to talk you through it while you're doing it, be that face-to-face or over it's like a Zoom call or something, or even just to kind of to be able to show you how to do it. Like even when it comes to basic things, if you're just starting out, somebody sitting with you and showing you how thin your paint needs to be, like, you know, that can be a game changer for a lot of people. The biggest mistake most beginners make is not thinning their paint enough, and actually it's a hard habit to get out of. I painted from the pot for a long time, and what I used to do was I used to obviously shake my little paint pot, open the lid of Citadel paint, and I would kind of like use water from the brush and mix the bit of paint that was in the lip of the lid and almost use that as like a small little kind of palette type thing. And I painted like that for years before I got a wet palette and started kind of thinning things down like that. So ask for advice. You don't always know the things that you're doing wrong until somebody points them out to you. But yeah, just pick the right people to ask, I would suggest. The fourth tip I'm going to give you is to accept failures, because you will get things wrong, especially when you're trying to paint outside your comfort zone, when you're trying to maybe try some new skills, you're trying some new techniques. We've been chatting about using an airbrush tonight in our live stream and about how difficult that can be and about getting it wrong and just kind of giving up and just packing it away and never using it again. Accept that failure happens. Like what we do for a hobby, and remember that it's a hobby, we'll come back to that. What we do for a hobby is not perfection, it's art. And we all try to kind of achieve different effects. We can all get the same paint, we can all get the same brush, and we can all get the same miniature, and we'd all kind of choose to paint it in a different way. It's an expression of like kind of what you want to achieve. It's an artistic endeavor. It's not about trying to replicate box art. It's not about perfection. So accept that there will be failures. Accept that you will do things wrong, but also remember that you can always spray over the top of it and start again. You can strip the paint off if you want to. You're not destroying anything by kind of trying this new thing. So everything's recoverable, everything can be sorted out, everything can be kind of like sort of painted over and start again from a blank canvas. But as long as you accept that you won't get it right every time, it takes a little bit of pressure off. The amount of people I've spoken to over the years who want to get started in miniature painting, but they don't want to ruin an expensive model, or they don't want to kind of like, there's almost this panic, this analysis paralysis of, well, where do I start? Have I even primed it the right color? Am I starting off in the wrong place? just accept that you'll get things wrong. That's absolutely fine. Like, sometimes getting something wrong will teach you more than getting it right. We just talked about this when I was talking about airbrushes earlier on in the chat, and that you will learn more from doing something wrong, because when you change something and put it right and it works, you'll know what you've done to make it work. If you get it right the first time by pure luck, it's going to be very hard to replicate that because you don't really know what you've done. So yeah, the fourth tip there, just accept failures. It's not about perfection. It's a hobby. You're meant to just have fun. You're meant to enjoy it. You're not painting for anybody else. You're painting for yourself. Accept that things will go wrong sometimes. And the last one, the fifth tip I'm going to give tonight, is give yourself time. I think we all want to kind of get things finished. We all end up wanting to rush things, especially me when I've been sort of doing stuff for the channel. If I've been speed painting stuff, if I'm trying to knock out an army because I'm trying to make a video out of it, and like I can't just kind of paint it over months and months because I need to do the video and kind of move on, if you like, or I need to hit it for a certain event or something like that. The time to kind of to push and try new things is not when you're under pressure for a certain time. Like if you're going to an event at the end of the month or something like that, and you want to paint a new hero model, and you think I'm going to try and do my best work on this, that's probably not the time to be trying any fancy techniques or trying to push out your comfort zone. The time to do that is to have a nice little kind of miniature just on the side that you just come back to from time to time, and even if it never gets finished, but it just becomes a miniature full of little techniques that you've been trying out, like I'm going to just try this little basin technique on this miniature, or there's a nice kind of curved surface over this big shoulder pad, I'm going to try and kind of like do some blending on this, or I'm going to try a bit of freehand on this shoulder pad where I've got a nice surface. Or I've got a tank that I've always wanted to paint and I'm going to try some freehand on the doors or something. Or I'm going to try some weathering on this because there's like a nice opportunity to kind of get some chipping medium in here. Or try some weathering powders. Just like, don't put yourself under pressure. Don't put yourself under a time limit. Don't give yourself a deadline when you're just exploring and you're experimenting and you're trying new stuff. So those were the 5 kind of tips I would give you about trying to raise your game. I'm not telling you how to kind of paint better. I'm not telling you how to kind of which fancy techniques to use. We all paint to a different standard. We all are trying to achieve different things. And if you want to improve your painting a little bit, I think using those 5 tips are a great place to start. Let me know what tips you would advise. Is there anything you think I've missed? Is there anything that you disagree with? I'd love to know what you think.